Yo, what's going on, guys? I'm gonna be going over yesterday's trade recap that I ended up taking. I'm gonna be going over today's price action. I ended up taking no trades today. I think today's price action was pretty poor. Me going over why I didn't end up taking anything, but yeah. Except for that, I just got pretty busy yesterday, so I wasn't really able to do that recap. But I'm gonna just do it super quickly now. Let's go back before market open. So coming into yesterday's price action, overall was leaning more bearish. We were inside of a daily key level at this point, don't get me wrong. So it was leaning both sides. I just wanted to see a clear direction and clear narrative before taking any trade here. Overall, we did have a bunch of gaps up higher, and we were delivering from sell side. DOLs lower, they weren't bad, but again, we had a new day opening gap down here, which I low key kind of had my eyes on for price to come to. And yeah, so pretty much simple, like just see what 930 does and kind of go from there. So if I want to go to 915 here, you can see that we ended up opening a 15-minute gap pre-market, um, right here, which we actually ended up tapping pre-market, and from here, 929. Yeah, so market opens lower here inside this 15-minute for value gap. At this point, the S&P 500 really didn't do anything. It didn't really manipulate into anything. And our draws on liquidity above are just not strong. It's just high resistance liquidity. As we can see right here, we just swept out a high. Hold on. Oops. Yeah, we just swept into a hourly gap, and we swept out this 9 a.m. internal 15-minute high, swept into an hourly gap, and then we displaced lower on market open, or manipulated lower, you could say, into this into this 15-minute for value gap, which we had already tapped. Now, overall, the reason why, this is what I'm going to talk about here, is we ended up getting this right after, right, which is this 1 minute inversion to the upside with really good displacement. Now, the reason I ended up fading this was pretty simple. We just had a lack of higher time frame narrative here, and simply a lack of higher time frame and narrative is just not really simply, because that is definitely something you just don't want to be in. If the higher time frame isn't clear, and in this scenario, I don't understand why you'd want to be taking the trade. This was a very, very lower time frame based trade. And then second of all, the structure here. Like the structure, there's literally no other high within this leg of price except for a high inside of an hourly gap. So your only target here is high resistance, right? So you're battling a high resistance versus high resistance scenario where we do look pretty bearish on the higher time frame as of right now. And it's a 15-minute gap versus an hourly gap. Overall, I mean, this displacement through this inversion was definitely not bad. But just for me, the lack of targets, the lack of structure, and the lack of a higher time frame narrative definitely made me sit out in this trade and kind of say to myself that there is more things wrong with this trade than there is right. But overall, this was a pretty good 930 play. It was pretty volatile, and this ends up delivering to full take profit. If you did target that 1-to-1, and yeah, from there, then we kind of ended up just doing a bunch of nothing, and then it came into chop, 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 and then this is when it was looking extremely obvious to me. So we ended up coming in here, we ended up wicking VWAP, and then we ended up coming up again within this leg of price here. We ended up wicking the 0.79 and VWAP and displacing lower again within this range. And with this, we were also delivering off of the hourly gap yet again. And we also had an SMT up here with the S&P 500. Now at this point, we left a failure swing to this really, really obvious low, in my opinion, and my draw on liquidity was much lower, being this daily gap. And we ended up opening up this 5-minute fair value gap, which we had pretty soon. I think it was like right here, right? Yeah, so we opened up this 5-minute fair value gap. Yeah, this is it here. Okay. At 10:46, we open up this 5-minute, and then 10:45 we open up this 5-minute, and then 10:45 also opened higher here. So we have that 10:45 stacking PO3 with the 10 a.m. as well. So 10 a.m. opens high, low close. 10:45 opens high into this 5-minute for value gap, which is sponsored by the hourly above, and we have a failure swing to an obvious draw on liquidity here, with another pretty good draw on liquidity being the daily and the new day opening gap below us as well, right? So at this point, I ended up taking this 1-minute CISD, and with this narrative just looking a lot clearer to me, and this low at minimum being extremely obvious, especially with this failure swing right here. And then with that, this trade ended up, sorry, it was right here. My entry was right here on this 1048 CISD. And we also had an internal SMT with the S&P 500, with both pairs manipulating into that 5-minute. So yeah, this trade was pretty clean to me. and it was very no-brainer, especially towards this draw liquidity that we had lower here. And I ended up taking this trade, taking this on the 10:48 candle with that 1 minute CISD, because I was very, very strongly convicted in this, and I ended up hitting full take profit on that trade. And that's pretty much going to wrap up that day, which was yesterday. Now, coming into today, overall, yeah, these markets are pretty rough. I'm not going to lie to you, but let's go back to 9:15. Overall, was leaning more bullish, I guess, simply just because we were delivering off of this. Boom, 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 boom. This 4 hour below us here, we were delivering off of, and we were also respecting this 4 hour gap, disrespecting bearish. Just a pretty simple kind of bias, I guess, and was leaning. The lower time frame was kind of looking a bit bearish, but again, I was just simply leaning off what market open would tell us. And we had relative equal lows down here at sorry, at Asia session. We had relative equal lows down here, and I think market open just ends up kind of obliterating them. I was looking at a target, so I was going to see if we wanted to manipulate into this small 30-minute that we had above us, wherever that was, right here, which was also VWAP. If you wanted to manipulate into that 30-minute and then head towards those relative equal lows, I wouldn't have minded that at all. But market just ends up opening lower here, and just leaving these highs and leaving all these gaps above us unfilled. So this was already pretty much a rough open. I wasn't really too much of a fan of this. And then I think this is where we ended up getting our first setup. Yeah, we ended up edging this hourly gap below us as well. But the S&P 500 at this point was already like almost towards previous day low. It was like down here. So I mean, I didn't really see it necessary for us to come to this gap if we are going to be bullish from this. But overall, like, there just wasn't really any good setups here. I think we had this unfilled 15-minute for value gap above us, which did end up opening up at around 10 o'clock, I believe, or maybe it was 9:45. Yeah, sorry, 9:45. So 9:45 ends up opening this 15-minute for value gap, and then we have this good like generation of liquidity here, and we end up coming into this gap, this 15-minute for value gap, and we end up getting this. The thing about these tiny 1 minute gap inversions, they just don't really look clean. I was kind of liking this though because of just how we were bouncing within this range, and overall we did wick the 0.79 of this range, and we did wick the C of that 15-minute for value gap extremely nicely, with that 9:45, technically 9:45 PO3, I guess. But again, I was looking to actually take this if we did get a CISD, or if we got a good closure on this 1 minute candle right here, because this 1 minute fair value gap that I was looking at just really wasn't giving me conviction. It was just really small, and it was just mid, and overall we were technically targeting high resistance here, so it's a bit meh. Like, you're targeting a low that swept a low inside of a gap, and you're also targeting like a low inside of an hourly gap as well, so it's a bit suspicious. But the narrative for me was definitely built more on the S&P 500, considering how close we ended up being to previous day low. Down here, it just looked like an abundantly obvious draw on the S&P 500 to me. So I was kind of stacking my narrative here off the S&P 500, and with what the S&P 500 was doing at this time as well, it just wasn't really fitting my interest. Especially with the S&P 500, he's still yet to manipulate anything. It was just pretty mid. I just wasn't a huge fan, and I wasn't convicted in this 1 minute. And I'm actually not even going to lie to you, I didn't even see this 1 minute gap. I didn't even see it. That just kind of goes to show you how shitty of a gap it is. And this ends up getting railed, and then soon after we end up getting this 5 minute inversion to the downside right here. Now, this was better. In my opinion, this trade was better, but again, this was another fade for me. Reason being was simply because the S&P 500 was what I was building my narrative off of, right? The S&P 500 was looking like it wanted previous day low. But during this time when NASDAQ inversed this 5 minute fair value gap, after wicking VWAP with the resweep, with the stop hunt inside the 15-minute gap, with the good 5 minute inversion, with the good targets, and being on the S&P 500 previous day low, at this point in time, this was 10:05, right? So if we want to go to 10:05 on the S&P 500, what were we doing? At 10:05, we were respecting this 5 minute gap and delivering away from it, and we also respected the hourly gap. We also respected this hourly gap in a discount at this time as well, and it just looked like the S&P 500 just didn't want to go lower, right? It was delivering off of this unfilled 5 minute, and it was just not in the same spot. So we had uncorrelation in distribution, and I really wanted to see the S&P 500 start to make a move lower, considering that was where my narrative was built on. Mainly because, again, previous day low was my draw on liquidity on the S&P 500, because it was just left a failure swing to it again, so it's just looking like I wanted to take it, and there wasn't really much of a reason for it not to take it. But during this moment in time, the S&P 500 was not looking bearish. It was not displacing lower. If anything, it was looking more bullish, and the higher time frame PO3s that happened were bullish. So it was kind of going against the S&P 500 and what it was doing. And when you're looking to take a trade, you need to have respect for the S&P 500 because these pairs move off of each other. And if one's doing another thing and the other one's doing another thing, they're not correlated in what move they want to go towards or wherever it may be, that's not a good sign, right? That's a pretty bad sign. And so yeah, this 5 minute inversion also ends up getting slammed, right? So it's just a pretty easy fade day for me. Nothing really clear enough to take, and the stuff that did happen that did look good wasn't good due to especially this one in particular was simply because like the S&P 500 was not delivering, right? It wasn't delivering. It didn't look like it wanted to go lower at all. It was just Nasdaq doing it all. And so yeah, and from here, I was still actually looking for a trade towards the London highs. We left like a failure swing here, I'm pretty sure. And then it just came into like 11 o'clock. I think we did. Oh yeah, so we actually didn't. We actually left London. So we left relative equal highs with London session highs, which is also equal highs. So yeah, interesting. I don't even know what to say, to be honest. April PA. Yeah, bro. Bring back April 2025, April 2024, please. Anything but this dog shit. Anyway, yeah, just let's get off April. April is a pretty rough month. I'm not gonna lie, it hasn't been the easiest. Um, these two trades to me, this 5 minute inversion, in my opinion, was not a pattern trade. But if you were paying attention to what the S&P 500 was doing during this trade, I do feel that you probably could have avoided this loss if you did take it. And then for the 1 minute, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even see the 1 minute gap, but again, same reason. S&P 500 was just not in an area where it wanted to go lower. Do you know what I mean? So at least, but I can't say with this 5 minute, it was technically in an area where it wanted to go lower due to it was manipulating. But again, it was not displacing through the 5 minute gap that I had here. It respected it and wanted to move higher. So it was just going off of what the market was telling me, and in that moment, it wasn't telling me that it wanted to go lower. So I ended up fading that trade. Even though I did really like the idea of this trade. But yeah, that's essentially going to be it for today's video, guys. No trades taken today. TP hit yesterday. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll be documenting my entire journey to profitability on this YouTube channel to show people what it takes and how I've learned and grown as a trader over the time. And yeah, I'm super excited for the future of this channel. And if if I helped any of you guys today by showing you the reasons why I faded a setup that you might have lost on, that's like super cool. That's like one of my main goals, is to help other people as well improve. And yeah, except for that, I will catch you guys in the next video. If you want to talk to me personally, my Instagram, TikTok, and Discord will be in the bio of this video. If you guys want to go check them out and add them up, we can 100% have a conversation about trading. And yeah, except for that, I will catch you guys in the next video, which will be tomorrow. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening. Peace.